Jacob FATU destroys Drew McIntyre. SmackDown YouTube script. Jacob FATU just committed the most savage act of violence in SmackDown history, and the footage of Drew McIntyre's brutal destruction will make your jaw drop to the floor. What happened wasn't just a wrestling match, it was a public execution that proved the Samoan werewolf is the most dangerous man in WWE, and Drew McIntyre might never be the same again after this career-ending beatdown. If you think you've seen brutal wrestling violence before, you're about to witness something that will redefine your understanding of what one human being can do to another in the name of sports entertainment. Jacob FATU didn't just defeat Drew McIntyre, he obliterated him with such savage intensity that even the medical staff looked traumatized by what they witnessed. The Scottish Warrior went into this match as one of WWE's most feared competitors, but he's leaving as a broken man who learned the hard way that there are levels to this business that he was never prepared to encounter. The sight of Drew McIntyre being carried out on a stretcher while Jacob FATU stood over the carnage like a conquering warlord will be replayed for decades as one of the most one-sided destructions in wrestling history. You want to talk about shocking displays of dominance that change everything? Jacob FATU didn't just win this match, he erased Drew McIntyre from relevance with such devastating efficiency that fans are already questioning whether the Scottish Warrior belongs in the same ring as the Tribal Combat Unit's most dangerous weapon. The match started with Drew trying to use his size and strength advantages, but within minutes it became clear that he had severely underestimated the raw power and athletic ability of Jacob FATU. The first superkick that caught Drew flush on the jaw sent him stumbling backwards like he'd been hit by a freight train, and that was just the beginning of his nightmare. But here's what makes this destruction absolutely infuriating for Drew's supporters: he never had a chance. From the opening bell, Jacob FATU was operating on a completely different level of intensity and violence that made Drew look like an amateur trying to compete with a professional assassin. The most shocking moment came when Drew attempted his signature Claymore kick, only to have Jacob FATU catch him in mid-air and transition immediately into a devastating Samoan drop that shook the entire ring. The counter was so smooth and powerful that it looked like FATU had been expecting Drew's biggest move and prepared the perfect response. Here's a question that's going to separate the casual fans from the wrestling experts: did you notice how Jacob FATU seemed to predict every single one of Drew's offensive moves like he had studied hours of tape specifically to counter the Scottish Warrior's arsenal? The systematic nature of Drew's destruction was absolutely brutal to witness. Jacob FATU wasn't just hitting moves randomly, he was methodically targeting Drew's legs to take away his mobility, his ribs to compromise his breathing, and his head to cloud his judgment. This wasn't a wrestling match, this was a masterclass in controlled violence. The most devastating sequence came when FATU trapped Drew in the corner and unleashed a series of hip attacks that literally bounced the Scottish Warrior off the turnbuckles like a pinball. Each impact was harder than the last, and by the fifth consecutive hit, Drew's legs had given out completely and he was only standing because the ropes were holding him up. But the absolute worst part for Drew came when he tried to mount a comeback with his traditional power moves, only to discover that Jacob FATU was not only faster than him but stronger too. When a 265-pound monster like Drew McIntyre can't overpower his opponent, you know he's in serious trouble. The crowd's reaction told the entire story of how shocking this beatdown was. What started as enthusiastic support for Drew gradually turned into stunned silence as fans realized they were watching one of their heroes get systematically dismantled by a man who seemed to exist on a completely different level of athletic ability. Quick question for the SmackDown regulars: when was the last time you saw the WWE Universe go completely silent during a match because they were genuinely concerned for a wrestler's safety? The most infuriating aspect of this entire massacre was how effortless Jacob FATU made it look. While Drew was gasping for air, struggling to stand, and clearly fighting just to survive, FATU looked like he was barely breaking a sweat. The contrast in their physical conditions made it obvious who was the superior athlete. The technical breakdown of this match reveals just how completely outclassed Drew was in every aspect of professional wrestling. Jacob FATU was faster, stronger, more agile, more technically sound, and possessed better ring awareness than the man who many considered to be one of WWE's elite performers. But perhaps the most shocking revelation was how Jacob FATU's moveset seemed specifically designed to neutralize everything that makes Drew McIntyre dangerous. Every counter, every reversal, every offensive sequence was perfectly crafted to exploit weaknesses in Drew's game that most fans didn't even know existed. The medical attention Drew required after this match was absolutely concerning. Multiple trainers rushed to check on his condition, and the lengthy delay before he could even sit up suggested that Jacob FATU had inflicted serious damage during their encounter. This wasn't just a wrestling loss, this was a legitimate medical emergency. Here's another question for the wrestling analysts: do you think Drew McIntyre's confidence will ever fully recover from being so thoroughly dominated by someone who made him look like he didn't belong in the same ring? The most disturbing aspect of Jacob FATU's performance was how he seemed to enjoy inflicting pain on Drew McIntyre. The look in his eyes as he delivered punishment wasn't just competitive intensity, it was genuine pleasure derived from causing suffering to another human being. This man isn't just a wrestler, he's a predator who feeds on violence. The aftermath of this match has sent shockwaves throughout the entire WWE locker room. Other superstars who watched this destruction are reportedly reconsidering whether they want any part of Jacob Fatu, knowing that what happened to Drew could just as easily happen to them. The psychological impact on Drew is going to be devastating. This is a man who has built his entire career on being one of the toughest, most resilient competitors in WWE, and Jacob Fatu just proved that all of Drew's toughness and resilience mean nothing when facing a truly superior opponent. But the most infuriating part of this entire situation is how Jacob Fatu celebrated after the match. Instead of showing any respect for Drew's effort or concern for his well-being, Fatu stood over his broken opponent like a conqueror surveying his conquered territory. The lack of sportsmanship was absolutely disgusting. The replay footage reveals details that make this destruction even more impressive and terrifying. Jacob Fatu's precision in targeting specific body parts, his perfect timing on counters, and his ability to seamlessly chain together devastating moves showed a level of wrestling intelligence that few performers possess. Here's a question for the technical wrestling fans: how many different ways did you count Jacob Fatu finding to inflict damage on Drew McIntyre throughout their match? The most shocking statistic from this match is that Drew McIntyre landed fewer than 10 significant offensive moves during the entire encounter. For a wrestler of his caliber to be so thoroughly shut down by any opponent is almost unprecedented in modern WWE programming. The backstage reaction to this massacre has been absolutely explosive. Veterans who have worked with both men are expressing genuine shock at how one-sided this encounter was, with many admitting they never expected to see Drew McIntyre so thoroughly outclassed by any opponent. But perhaps the most concerning development is how this destruction has elevated Jacob Fatu's status in the eyes of WWE management. Sources suggest that company executives are already discussing major championship opportunities for the Samoan Werewolf after witnessing his complete domination of a former WWE champion. The ripple effects of this match are going to be felt throughout WWE for months. Every superstar now knows that Jacob Fatu isn't just another talented wrestler, he's a legitimate threat to end careers and destroy reputations with the kind of savage beating he delivered to Drew McIntyre. The most devastating moment came during the post-match medical examination when it became clear that Drew was having difficulty remembering where he was or what had happened. The head trauma inflicted by Jacob Fatu's assault was so severe that it temporarily compromised the Scottish Warrior's cognitive function. Here's a final question for the WWE Universe: after witnessing this level of destruction, do you think any current WWE superstar has what it takes to match Jacob Fatu's intensity and violence in the ring? The investigation into how Jacob Fatu was able to so completely dominate a wrestler of Drew McIntyre's caliber has revealed months of preparation and study. Video analysis shows that Fatu had apparently studied every match in Drew's recent history, identifying patterns and weaknesses that he exploited with surgical precision. The strategic approach to this destruction makes it even more impressive. This wasn't just raw talent overwhelming an opponent, this was intelligent preparation combined with superior athleticism, resulting in the complete dismantling of a former world champion. But the most important takeaway from this match is that Jacob Fatu has officially announced himself as the most dangerous man in WWE. The Samoan Werewolf has proven that he can take any opponent, no matter how accomplished or respected, and reduce them to a broken mess through sheer force of will and superior ability. The transformation of Jacob Fatu from promising newcomer to legitimate monster has been completed with this destruction of Drew McIntyre. Anyone who underestimated the Samoan Werewolf before tonight won't make that mistake again after witnessing what he's capable of doing to elite competition. Drew McIntyre entered this match as one of WWE's most respected warriors, but he's leaving as a cautionary tale about what happens when you step into the ring with Jacob Fatu unprepared for the level of violence and intensity he brings to every encounter. The wrestling world has a new apex predator, and his name is Jacob Fatu. Every superstar in WWE should be watching this footage and asking themselves one simple question: are they prepared to face the most dangerous man in sports entertainment, or will they become his next victim?